Hey guys, so the thing about ethics is that it's no good in theory, it's only good in practice. And so sometimes we're wise, I think about what we would do in a very difficult situation. And some of those scenarios are outlandish, really, quite humorous or startling to get our attention and really force us to address a particular issue that we wouldn't often address so overtly in our actual lives. I'm going to read a little scenario. It's called the trolley problem. You might have run across it before or heard of it. I wanted to just read it to you and make some comments about it. So it goes like this. There's a trolley coming down the tracks ahead of you, and there are 5 people tied to the tracks and unable to move. The trolley will continue coming and will kill the 5 people. There's nothing you can do to rescue the 5 people except that there's a lever. If you pull the lever, the train will be directed to the other track, which has 1 person tied to it. You have 2 choices. Do nothing and the 5 people will die, or pull the lever and save the 5 people, but that 1 person will die. So here it's forcing you to address an issue of really utilitarianism. Do you believe so much that it's better that 1 would die than 5, that you'll actually intervene in destiny and pull the lever and switch the train to the other track? So think about that for a second and give it an answer. What do? You're standing there, you have the power to pull the lever, to direct the trolley to kill 1 man and to save the 5, or do nothing. Whether you consider that just being passive or actively doing nothing, it doesn't matter. The consequence is going to be the same. It will plow over the 5 and kill them all. So here's a similar situation, just a little bit changed. There's a trolley coming down the tracks and ahead. There are 5 people tied to the tracks that are unable to move. The trolley will continue down the track and the 5 people will be killed. However, in this situation, you're standing on a bridge above the train tracks and you can see the train coming. There's a man standing next to you who is enormous and heavy, so that if you push him off of the bridge, he'll fall in front of the train. It will kill him, but the train will stop and not kill the other 5. Do you do nothing and let the other 5 people die? Or do you push the big guy down the bridge? He will be killed, but will stop the trolley and save the 5 people. So answer that. You're standing on the bridge. You have an opportunity to stop 5 people from perishing with the trolley wreck, or you can push the enormous man off. The enormous man will perish, but he will stop the train before it reaches the 5 men and they'll live. What often happens in this scenario is those that are more utilitarian in the first scenario and say, well, I get no pleasure from it, but it's better that 1 would perish than 5, so I will pull the lever. A lot of people feel like it's the only solution. If you don't, and you said, no, I will not touch the lever, then you are more deontological or principle-oriented. And your principle is more or rights-oriented, meaning that everyone has the right to life and liberty, and anything that you do can't violate those rights for any one individual. No matter what benefit comes to how many people, you won't engage in an act that the consequence would be to hurt someone innocent, presumably. I don't know why he's tied up on the tracks, but it says nothing about his guilt in any regard. So for those who said, I'm utilitarian, I would pull the lever if doing so would save 5 and 1 other would perish, because more people survive than perish in that scenario. So I would act. They find it much more difficult in the second scenario, where you'd have to push the big man off the bridge to stop the locomotion of the trolley in order to save the 5. It's the same exact scenario, but in one case, you would take your hands and put it on a lever and pull the lever. In the second case, you would take your same hands and put them on a human being and push him over. In doing so, elicits different feelings from most of us. In one case, we feel like we're at least a little bit removed from the actual death of this person because we have a lever going out to the tracks and the tracks switch, and then as a consequence of that, it steams over the person. But in the second case, we actually are taking out an element, which is we actually are touching that man in order to push him off. And that is enough for a lot of people to begin to think differently about this scenario and say, that would be murdering someone. I know it would save 5 others, but I can't do it. So all of a sudden you went from a utilitarian view to a more deontological or rights perspective. Everyone has the right to survive, to live, to not be murdered. I gave this scenario in Romania, and I've done it many times in smaller classes and so forth, talking about ethics. And it was funny, just like here in the United States, they had all sorts of reasonings. People go to great extents to try to justify what they're doing. One person said, and this is ridiculous, okay, I don't agree with this whatsoever, but it's informative to discuss. He said, well, the person at the top was really big. I think he got the impression that he was fat. And if he's fat, he's probably, lazy fat guy. And I think a lazy fat guy, I don't care or something like that. And I thought, wow, you're really working hard to try to justify pushing the man off the bridge to save the 5 others. Because it's so hard to say it's utilitarian because you're actually engaged in the act on kind of a first person level versus being once removed where you just pull the lever and all I did was pull the lever and it was the train's decision which way to go on the tracks, even though I directed it. So these are difficult scenarios. The point here is that difficult scenarios make us think about what our ethical framework really is and under what circumstances. The time to think about what we do in a situation is before we face it. Now, I don't think we need to have lots of Troley examples because most of us aren't going to ever encounter things like that. But most of us will have the opportunity to steal from our employers, to steal time, to steal resources. We'll have opportunities to lie and to cheat, big and small lies and cheats, all the time. In our families, at work, all the time we'll have these opportunities. So we really need to think, what's the cost of doing that to me? And what does it mean about me if I engage in those behaviors? When I was young in high school or something, or junior high, my dad had kind of the talk with me. And I remember sitting on our porch and he was saying, son, the time to think about and decide about premarital sex is not when you're in the back seat of your car with a really attractive girl. It's now. And I think I made him very proud with regard to that, for a number of reasons, but partly it was my decision too. I really saw the downsides to doing that outside of that situation. But had I waited and not contemplated who I am and what I want to be and how I want to behave, that decision, I'm sure, would have been much more difficult when I found myself in situations that I didn't ever expect to be in. And now I'm older and I've lived many more years and had many more opportunities to act either ethically or unethically according to my own set of values. And my feeling is stronger than ever that we really, as new entrants into the field of business and as young people preparing to be married and have children and families, relationships and friendships and so forth, we really need to think about our character and what we do choose to believe and how we will live this life. The time to do that, as my dad said, is before you're in the back seat of a car, before you're under fire. It's much more difficult to make the decisions that you haven't contemplated. When you've thought about them ahead of time, you prepare yourself. And that's mostly what we can do in college with chapters on ethics, is really encourage you to think long and hard about who you are, what you believe, what you will and what you won't do. So I encourage you to do that very thing. Thanks.